She had everything: wealth, status, and a life most could only dream of. But behind the gates of her mansion, a secret weighed heavy on her heart: two innocent children growing up without a father. To protect them, she did something no one expected. She left her riches behind and stepped into the world of the poor. What she didn't know was that her journey would collide with a man who knew struggle far too well, a black waiter fighting battles most couldn't see. Their worlds were about to clash in a way that shocked everyone. But why him? And why now? By all appearances, Claire Matthews had it all. A sprawling estate on the edge of the city, the kind of wealth that turned heads, and two beautiful twins who filled her home with laughter. Yet, behind the polished glass windows and luxury cars, there was a silence that cut deeper than any outsider could see. The absence of a father weighed on her children's lives, and every smile she gave them carried the shadow of a truth she tried to hide. Money could buy comfort, but it could never buy love. Determined to give her twins more than a name and fortune, Claire began to wonder if any man could truly see her for who she was, not just the millionaire on the headlines. And so, one quiet morning, she shed the diamonds, locked away the designer dresses, and stepped out in plain clothes, determined to find someone real. But what Claire didn't expect was where fate would lead her, into the worn hands of a man who knew nothing of her world. A black waiter, juggling two jobs, carrying the invisible weight of prejudice every single day. Their paths would soon collide, and when they did, nothing in her carefully controlled life would ever look the same again. Claire's disguise became her new reality. Gone were the flowing gowns and manicured hair. Instead, she blended into the crowds of the working poor, the kind of people she had once driven past without ever stopping to notice. The city looked different from this side: the cracked sidewalks, the dimly lit apartments, the endless hustle just to survive. Here, there were no chauffeurs or bodyguards, only people fighting to make it through another day. It was at a small neighborhood diner, tucked between shuttered shops and a flickering streetlight, that she first crossed paths with him. His name was David. To most, he was just the waiter, a man with a tired smile, carrying trays heavier than his thin frame should have allowed. But beneath that uniform, he carried something far heavier: the weight of being judged before he even opened his mouth. Claire watched him quietly from her corner booth. She saw the way customers waved him down without even looking at his face, the way some spoke to him like he wasn't human. And yet, David endured it all with a quiet resilience, never raising his voice, never letting his frustration spill over. For Claire, who had lived a life shielded from such ugliness, it was the first crack in her carefully built worldview. But she didn't come here to pity. She came to see if, somewhere beyond her wealth, a man existed who could love her children, not her fortune. The first time David noticed her, it wasn't because she stood out. In fact, that was the point: she didn't. She sat there in plain clothes, no jewelry, no signs of privilege. Just another tired woman grabbing a cheap meal. And that was exactly how Claire wanted it. "Rough day?" he asked with a faint smile as he poured her coffee. She nodded, though the truth was far more complicated. It wasn't the weight of work, but the weight of secrecy pressing on her chest. Over time, her visits became frequent. Some nights, she stayed longer, watching him handle rudeness with quiet grace. Other nights, she saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the kind of weariness that spoke of a man fighting battles far bigger than unpaid bills. Then came the moment that changed everything. One evening, the diner filled with a group of wealthy businessmen, loud, entitled, and dripping with arrogance. Claire froze the moment she saw them. They reminded her of her own circle, the kind of men who believed their money gave them the right to treat anyone as less. David approached their table with his usual professionalism. But it wasn't enough. One man sneered, mocking the way David spoke. Another questioned whether someone like him even belonged in a place serving paying customers. The laughter that followed was sharp, cruel, and loud enough to turn heads. Claire's stomach tightened. She waited for someone, anyone, to step in. But the other diners looked away, pretending not to hear. Silence became complicity, and in that silence, David stood alone. He didn't lash out. He didn't shout. Instead, he straightened his back, took their order, and walked away with dignity intact. But Claire saw it: the slight tremor in his hand, the way his jaw tightened as he disappeared into the kitchen. He was holding everything inside. For the first time, Claire felt the sting of witnessing racism up close, not as an article, not as a statistic, but as a wound carved in real time. And she realized something else. This wasn't rare. This was daily life for him. The next days brought more shadows of truth. She followed David outside one night, curious about his world beyond the diner. That's when she saw him walk into a second job, cleaning offices long past midnight. He worked until dawn, then came back to the diner again by morning. His life was an endless cycle of labor, with no escape. But hardship wasn't the only thing following him. Prejudice shadowed him like a ghost. Claire saw it in the way security guards trailed him through stores, in the suspicious stares when he entered certain neighborhoods. Once, she even witnessed an officer stop him without cause, demanding to see his ID, speaking to him with an edge of hostility that made her heart race. David complied calmly, but his silence wasn't submission, it was survival. Claire began to understand, this wasn't just his life, it was the reality of countless others. The fortune she hid away at home suddenly felt irrelevant compared to the invisible chains he faced daily. And yet, through all this, David never showed bitterness. He treated strangers with kindness, even when it wasn't returned. He carried his pain with a quiet dignity, shielding it from the world. That strength, raw, unpolished, and real, moved Claire more than any polished suitor ever had. But the world doesn't reward quiet strength. One evening, as the twins sat at home with their nanny, Claire ventured again to the diner. The night was different, tense. The same group of businessmen returned, this time drinking heavily. Their insults grew louder, sharper. They mocked his uniform, his skin, his very presence. Claire felt her pulse race. She wanted to stand, to shout, to reveal who she was and shut them down with the power of her name. But she couldn't. Not yet. To do so would unravel her disguise, and with it, the truth she needed to know. Could anyone love her for herself, not her wealth? As the laughter grew, David finally set down his tray. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned. I'll treat you with respect. You don't have to return it, but I won't let you treat me like less than human. The diner fell silent. For a moment, it felt like the whole room held its breath. And then, one of the men shoved him. A tray clattered to the floor. The sound cut through the room like a gunshot. Claire froze. Every instinct told her to step forward. But before she could move, David straightened again, refusing to retaliate. His restraint was his shield, but she could see the toll it took. The men laughed, satisfied with their cruelty, and walked out. The room slowly returned to its rhythm, but nothing felt normal anymore. Claire's heart pounded. That night, as she returned home to her twins, one truth rang louder than ever. She wasn't just looking for a father. She was witnessing a man who lived in a world stacked against him, a world that would judge her children differently if they were his. And that thought terrified her. The days ahead grew heavier. Claire's secret life began to tangle with her reality. She couldn't shake the images, the mockery, the stares, the shove that nearly broke him. And yet, she couldn't stay away. Every visit pulled her deeper into his world, and every injustice carved another question into her heart. Could her wealth protect him? Or would her world destroy him? The tension grew unbearable, not just for Claire, but for the story itself. Two lives, worlds apart, now orbiting dangerously close. And everyone watching knew. When those worlds finally collided, the shock would not just belong to them, it would ripple far beyond. Because the question wasn't just whether a millionaire could find love in a place she didn't belong. The question was whether love could survive a world built on division. And that answer was coming. Soon. Claire is torn, she's drawn to David's strength, yet haunted by the reality of racism that could consume him, her, and her children if their lives became one. The audience is left waiting for the collision that will explode in the climax. The night began like any other, but it would end with lives changed forever. Claire slipped once again into her plain clothes, tucking away every trace of the life she had built behind her mansion walls. The twins were asleep, unaware that their mother was about to step into the shadows of a world they had never known. The city lights flickered as she walked toward the diner, her heart carrying a strange mix of anticipation and dread. She told herself she came to watch David, to learn more about him. But deep down, she knew she was searching for something much more dangerous: truth. The diner was busy, buzzing with late-night chatter and the clatter of dishes. David moved quickly between tables, balancing plates with the practiced rhythm of a man who had learned to survive on stamina alone. But even as he smiled at customers, Claire saw it, the exhaustion in his posture, the weight in his eyes. Then the door opened. A familiar group walked in. The businessmen. The ones who had mocked him before. Their laughter was loud, their arrogance thicker than the smoke of their cigars. Claire's stomach turned. She knew nothing good would come of this night. David stiffened when he saw them but forced a professional nod. He had no choice. A job was survival, and survival left no room for pride. Claire watched as he approached their table, his voice steady but his shoulders tense. The insults began quietly at first. Comments about the service. About the speed. About his skin. Each remark landed like a stone, meant not to question but to wound. The laughter grew louder, sharper, until the entire diner seemed to pulse with it. Claire's hands curled into fists under the table. Her instinct was to stand, to shout, to reveal herself. To use her name, her wealth, her power to silence them. But she couldn't, not yet. Her disguise was her shield, and her silence, for now, was her prison. Then it happened. One of the men grabbed David by the arm, yanking him back as he tried to walk away. A plate slipped from his hand, shattering across the floor. The sound cut through the diner like a warning shot. Gasps echoed. Every eye turned to the scene. "Look at you," one man sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "Can't even carry a plate without dropping it. And they let you serve people here?" The words hung in the air like poison. David froze, his chest rising and falling faster. His hands trembled, not from fear of them, but from fear of what might happen if he let his anger show. He had learned long ago that a single wrong move could turn him from victim to threat in an instant. The diner fell silent. Phones were lifted. Customers leaned forward, watching. Claire's pulse raced. She could hear her own breath in her ears. This was it, the moment that could define everything. David slowly pulled his arm free, his voice calm but firm. "Respect is free. You don't have to give it. But I won't let you take away my dignity." For a moment, the diner seemed frozen in time. Then the man shoved him, hard. David stumbled back, crashing into a table. Glass shattered, liquid spilled across the floor. Claire jumped to her feet, her heart pounding. Before David could rise, another man loomed over him. "People like you should know your place," he spat. And then, the sirens. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows. Someone had called the police. Relief flickered in Claire's chest for a brief second, until the doors burst open and 2 officers stormed inside. But relief quickly turned to dread. The officers didn't look at the businessmen. They didn't ask questions. Their eyes locked immediately on David, the black man on the ground. "Hands where I can see them," one shouted, his hand already on his weapon. Gasps erupted around the diner. Claire's heart nearly stopped. She wanted to scream that he had done nothing, that he was the victim, not the aggressor. But her voice caught in her throat. David's chest rose and fell in rapid bursts. He had seen this scene before, not here, not now, but everywhere. He knew how it ended for men who looked like him. His hands lifted slowly into the air, palms trembling. The businessmen stood to the side, silent now, smirks tugging at their lips. They knew the power of silence. They knew the weight of perception. And perception, in this moment, painted David as the threat. Claire's nails dug into her palms. Her disguise no longer mattered. Her mission no longer mattered. If she stayed silent now, the story would end not with a lesson, but with a tragedy. She stepped forward, her voice shaking but loud. He didn't do anything. They're the ones who attacked him. The diner erupted. Whispers surged. Phones lifted higher. The officers hesitated, caught between the weight of witnesses and the force of their assumptions. But then one officer moved closer, hand tightening on his holster. "Ma'am, step back. We'll handle this." Claire's voice broke, but she didn't move. "No. You don't understand. He's not the threat here. They are." She pointed at the businessmen, her hand shaking. The officers glanced at them, then back at David. One muttered something under his breath, but the tension didn't break. David remained frozen, his arms still raised, sweat trickling down his temples. His eyes locked with Claire's, filled with fear, anger, and a quiet question: would this be the end? The room felt like it was collapsing in on itself. Every second stretched into eternity. The officers' hands hovered dangerously close to their weapons. The businessmen shifted uncomfortably, sensing their moment of control slipping away. The diners held their breath, their cameras capturing every frame. Claire's heart thundered. Her disguise had carried her this far, but now it was useless. There was only one way to stop this. She stepped fully into the light, her voice steady now. "My name is Claire Matthews. You might know me. I own Matthews Enterprises. And I am telling you, this man is innocent." Gasps rippled through the room. The businessmen's faces paled as the recognition hit. The officers faltered, caught between their instincts and the weight of her name. David's arms slowly lowered, though his body still trembled. The danger had not passed, not yet. The officer closest to him finally spoke, his voice lower now. "Ma'am, are you saying you witnessed everything?" "Yes," Claire said firmly, her eyes never leaving David. "And I'll make sure everyone else does too." She gestured toward the dozens of phones recording, capturing every word. The tension broke like glass shattering. The officers backed away slightly, their hands leaving their weapons. The businessmen shifted, suddenly aware of the trap they had walked into, not the trap they set, but the one they built for themselves. David's chest heaved as he finally stood, his dignity battered but unbroken. The diner buzzed with murmurs, the weight of the moment pressing down on every soul present. But for Claire, one truth echoed louder than the chaos: she had stepped out of her disguise, and in doing so, stepped into a war far bigger than herself. Because this wasn't just about her, or David, or even her twins. This was about a world that could turn a victim into a suspect with the flick of a glance. A world that judged before it listened. And now, everyone was watching. The cameras captured it all. The tension. The injustice. The reveal. The question wasn't whether the world would see. The question was whether it would care. David has survived the immediate danger, but the battle is far from over. With Claire's identity revealed, the story is no longer private. It's public. It's on record. And the resolution must answer: will justice be served, or will silence win again? The diner never felt the same again. In the hours that followed, the businessmen were escorted out in shame, their arrogance stripped away under the weight of dozens of cameras. The officers, once quick to judge, were forced to retreat, leaving behind a silence heavier than any sound. But the damage, emotional, psychological, had already been done. David stood quietly near the counter, his uniform stained, his hands still trembling from the close brush with disaster. He had not raised his fists, not shouted, not fought back. And yet, for a moment, his life had hung on the edge of a decision made by men who saw only the color of his skin. Claire approached him slowly. Her disguise had shattered, her secret life revealed. She was no longer the quiet woman in plain clothes, she was the millionaire, the figure people whispered about, the mother of 2 children waiting at home. But in that moment, none of that mattered. All she saw was a man whose dignity had been tested in ways she could never fully understand. The cameras didn't just capture the humiliation, they captured the truth. By morning, the footage spread across phones and screens. Headlines erupted, hashtags formed, and strangers debated in living rooms and offices. Some saw it as a clear picture of injustice. Others tried to twist it, to justify what couldn't be justified. For David, it was another scar. For Claire, it was a wake-up call. And for the world that watched, it was a mirror. Because this wasn't just about a millionaire in disguise or a black waiter caught in the crossfire of prejudice. This was about a society where silence becomes permission, where dignity can be stripped in seconds, and where justice is too often conditional. Claire returned home that night and looked at her twins, asleep in the comfort of their safe beds. For the first time, she understood that their future wasn't just shaped by wealth or opportunity, it would be shaped by the world outside their walls. A world that might one day judge them not by who they were, but by what they looked like. And that thought terrified her more than loneliness ever had. David walked home under the same streetlights as always, but everything felt heavier. He had survived the night, yes, but survival wasn't victory. It was exhaustion, it was resilience, it was the burden of knowing tomorrow might bring another test, another humiliation, another moment where his humanity would be questioned. And yet, he walked with his head high. Because dignity, though fragile, is not easily destroyed. The story doesn't end with a single night in a diner. It echoes in every workplace, every street corner, every space where prejudice still breathes. It asks us to confront the uncomfortable truth. How many more times must a life be nearly destroyed before change is more than a headline? The footage may fade, the outrage may quiet, but the question remains, burning, relentless, unanswerable unless we choose to answer it. And so, the challenge is not for David, or Claire, or even her twins. The challenge is for us. Will we be the silent diners, staring at our plates while injustice unfolds? Or will we finally stand, speak, and make silence impossible? Because until we do, this story will not end.